flats, percentages, flats, percentages. I can't decide. If this is you, then we're going to help you out a bit here. Hi, and welcome to Red Evony. I am Akayasha. You can call me Aka, and this is flats versus percentages. Now, the topics of flats and percentages, which is the better refine, is something that has been a bit of a hot topic in Evony. And there have been quite a few good videos that have been done on this, but here I'm going to give you my take on the topic of flats versus percentages. To do that, we're going to start off with going through how buffs work. Then we're going to talk about which refine is better. We're going to look at attacking, we're going to look at defending, and we're going to give some general observations on everything that we discussed so far. So let's get right into it. When we want to discuss how buffs work in Evony, the first thing that we need to keep in mind is that each troop has specific stats. They've got stats for attack, defense, and HP. And the buffs that we get in the game are added on top of the base stats that the troops have. I think a lot of us have that understanding of how the buffs work already. Let's take a look at a troop here. Come to my barracks, and we look at my T14 troop here. If we tap on it, it shows you the various stats that this troop has. So you can see attack, HP, defense. And these stats are in green, meaning that these stats are buffed. Depending on the amount of buffs that you have, these stats here will be different for every keep. So you can go and check your keep now, go to the T14s, look, you will see that the values that you have will be a bit different than the ones that I have here. For us to really understand how the buffs work, we need the base stats. Base stats are universal in Evony. They form the basis upon which all the buffs are added on top. And we can calculate that here from our account, okay? So we have these stats here. I'm going to call them the nominal stats. And these nominal stats are made up of three things. The first one is they're made up of the base stats, right? Then in addition to the base stat, if we come over here to the monarch and we come to detail, if we scroll down to the military section where we have the troops, we get here. We have the buff that we have here. So we were looking at ground troops. In this case, we have ground troop attack. For my keep, I have 214.1%. So this percentage is taken of the base stat and added to the base stat. In addition to this, if we scroll up a bit, we see here single ground troop attack. This is a flat stat which is also added to what we have to give the nominal stat. So the nominal stat that we saw there is made up of those three stats. And when you have those three stats for your keep, then you can calculate the base stat. So with that said, I'm going to switch over to the spreadsheet so that we can really see what we're talking about here. Okay, so here we have the spreadsheet that we're going to be working with. And in this column, you can see the nominal stats that we have here, going all the way from T1 to T15. And in this column here, we have the base stats, which are calculated with a formula using the nominal stats. On this spreadsheet, these base stats have been calculated, but if you go to a website like Evony Guides Wiki, you can get those base stats there. I'll drop a link in the description for anyone that is interested. Now, when you get buffs in Evony, those buffs are a percentage of the base stats that we have here. So, for example, when we have our general here, let me bring up my ground general, okay? And we are doing refines on the general. When we are doing refining, for civilization gear, the cap for refining is 30%. But realistically, we are not going to get 30%. It is extremely difficult to get a good refine and almost damn near impossible to end up with the 30% refine. So, for the purpose of the analysis that we're going to do here, we're going to take a percentage of 25%. That 25% is what we would consider as a good refine in any circumstance for sieve gear, and that's something that is reasonable and more practical than looking at the 30%. This is what we get when we apply the 25% buff to the base stats. Okay? So these are the buffs that we're going to get here. Now, when it comes to doing flat refines, in the case of ground attack, for example, the maximum refine that we can get for ground attack is 513. In the same situation as with the percentage refines, it is practically impossible to get that 513. So we're going to use a value that is a bit more reasonable. We're going to use the flat equivalent of the 25% buff that we had here. You can see we've calculated it here. For this attack, that comes to 428. So that's what we have here. And unlike with percentage refines, flat refines are applied across the board uniformly. So, putting it simply, when we talk about percentages and flats, this is what it comes down to. Okay? And in this case, we're looking at ground attack. Now, you might look at this and notice a few things. Okay? The first thing that you notice is that with the percentage refine, the values that you get are much higher when you're looking at the higher tier troops. And conversely, the values are much lower when you are looking at the lower tier troops. And as you can see, flats are even across the board. This, in essence, is why percentages are generally considered better for higher tier troops, while flats are generally considered better for lower tier troops. You've probably heard of that somewhere before. This is why. Okay? And with the T1 traps that we've been seeing lately, we know that the convention is to go with flats. This is why. Because if you get a decent percentage refine, 25% in this case, and you get a flat refine, 428, you can see how much higher the flat buff increases what you get for the T1s. In this case, it's almost 17 times. 17 times what you would get if you had a 25% refine on your general. And as you can see, the flats are much better going up for the lower tier troops. Now, what we have here, we can see this line here that we've highlighted here. This is essentially the cutoff point. What this means is that above this point, percentages give you more value than flat buffs. Below this point, flat buffs give you more value than percentages. So, as we can see, for T10 and below, flats are better. For T11 and above, percentages are better. So that's basically how these buffs work. Now, the next important thing that we need to factor in, which I'm sure some of you are probably already thinking about, is debuffs. So we're going to look at several debuff scenarios here. We're going to look at the scenario of being fully debuffed. Okay? When you're fully debuffed, that's a 50% debuff that we have here. We're also going to look at another scenario where there's a 30% debuff, and another scenario where there's a 20% debuff. The reason why we're including these, we'll talk about a bit later on in the video. Now, when we factor in debuffs, there is a bit of a change, okay? So, if we look at this here, these are the new cutoff points that we looked at here. So, in the case of being fully debuffed, anything from here, from T13 and below, will benefit more from flat refines than percentage refines when you are fully debuffed, okay? And then you can see the cutoff points for the 30% debuff and for the 20% debuff. Now, we've done this for ground troops for attack, all right? But also, we've also done the same thing here for HP, okay? So this is what it looks like for HP. And we've done the same thing here for defense. So we've done this analysis for the 3 stats for the troops. And of course, we've not just done it for ground, we've done it for calves, we've done it for siege, and we've done it for ranged troops. Now, we go to the question of which is better, flat buffs or percentage buffs. And the first scenario that we're going to look at is when you are attacking. So, when you are attacking and you have your attacking general, let me bring up my ground general here, which refine is better for you to go with? Now, in this case, looking at the values that we have here, my recommendation is that when you are going with your attacking generals, it is better to go with percentage refines over flat refines. And this is the reason why I say this, okay? You can see that in the situation where we are fully debuffed, only T14s and above will benefit from having a percentage buff, okay? T13 and below will benefit from having flat buffs over percentage buffs. That's what we are seeing here. But the situations in the game where you get fully debuffed are quite limited. In most cases, the only time in the game where you'll be fully debuffed, if at all, is when you are attacking a keep. But there are other non-keep attacking situations that we face in the game. For example, when you're attacking in a building. Now, I had a look at some of my reports. This is a recent report that I had from Battlefield. This report was in a building, Constantinople. And we can see this is calves versus ground. You can see no subs included. And if we go to the buff section here, we can see the buffs coming down and we can see the debuffs. Now, the reality of Evony is that once you get to a certain level in the game, there is no attacking situation that you're going to face that you will not be debuffed. That is because of the research in the academy and the military academy. Now, looking at this report, I'm on the attacking side. Here are my buffs, and here is the corresponding debuff that the opponent had. In this case, the debuffs that will be required to fully debuff my mounted attack would be 644. But, as you can see, the opponent had 328. That's not up to the full 50% debuff, right? That's somewhere between the 30 and the 20%. And this is why these two debuff scenarios are included in the analysis. Because based on what I've seen so far, most non-keep attacking situations, the debuffs that you face will be somewhere within this range, somewhere within the 20 to 30% range. And there are a lot of non-keep situations that we face. In addition, with bosses like Pans and things like that, some of our attacking generals are also used for killing bosses. That is why I would recommend that going with percentage buffs on your attacking general is the better way to go. And this is the situation when we are looking at your attacking general for ground, for mounted, and for ranged. The only exception to this is when you are attacking with siege. Here we have the analysis for siege. And the reason why I say siege is the exception is that because of the way siege is used, siege is almost exclusively used in keep situations. And we know for a fact that siege attack buffs are very easy to debuff in the game. in quite a few situations, you'll be facing full debuffs on your siege attack. And as we can see here, the cutoff point for this is T14. So everything T14 and below will benefit more from flat buffs than they will from percentage buffs. This changes a bit though when you start going above T14. So as we can see here, we have T15. Okay, T15 is above the cutoff point. What this means is that even if you are fully debuffed, percentages will still be better than flat buffs for your T15s. So if you are someone that has T15s, that's something that you're going to have to factor in. It will depend on the composition of the march that you're sending, how much of the march is T15 versus T14 going down to T11. And as you can see, flats will be better for everything T14 and below. So that's something that you will have to factor in when you're doing your refining. Now, if we look at HP, for example here, Siege HP is quite a difficult start to debuff in the game. In most likelihood, you will not face a situation where you are fully debuffed on Siege HP. Not saying that it's impossible, but it's just very unlikely. In that case, you'll probably be looking somewhere around the 20 to 30% debuff range. And as we can see, these are the cutoff points that we have for that. So above here, T13 and above are better with percentage refines. T12 and below are better with flat refines. If we look at the defense is slightly different than the others because of where the cutoff point is. But in a situation where you're not fully debuffed on siege defense, then T11 is the cutoff point. So what can we say here for siege? In my opinion, for siege attack, probably better to go with flat refines. For siege HP, depending on how much you're debuffed, I would say probably better to go with percentages over flats. And for defense, probably better to go with percentages over flats as well. But as you can see, one of the main things that you need to take into consideration here is whether you're doing a big siege or a small siege. In my opinion, for small siege, attack, flats are better. For HP, flats are better as well. And for defense, flats are better as well. So if you have a separate siege general for small siege, probably better to go with flats all across the board. Now, we'll look at the situation where it comes to defense. When it comes to defense, the question of whether flats or percentages, which is better, is not quite as clear-cut, in my opinion, as it is for when you're attacking. So let's take a look at the mounted analysis that we have here. And we can see that when you're fully debuffed, the cutoff point is T14. So everything T14 and below, better to go with flats. And when you have the 30 to 20% debuff, then T12 is the cutoff point here and T11 is the cutoff point here. And it's pretty much the same thing when you're looking at the HP stats and when you're looking at the defense stats. So when it comes to defense, when you factor in the debuffs, you can see that more of your lower tier troops will benefit a great deal from having the flat refines. And this is very apparent when you're looking at a situation where you are fully debuffed. Now, if I use myself as an example, most of the people that are attacking me, when I am attacked, I am practically fully debuffed on all my attacking stats. Here is an example of a report that I got completely zeroed, and we can see the attack that I'm going up against here. And let's look at the buffs, all right? So these are my buffs, these are the attacker's buffs. And let's look at the debuffs. As you can see, for pretty much all the attacking stats, I am fully debuffed. So, using this example, in my case, it would be better for me to go with flat refines over percentages for defense, particularly when I'm looking at attack. However, there's another thing to take into consideration, and that's when you are being rallied. Here, I have a report of me taking a defense from a rally. Here, we have the stats here. Notice that the debuffs from rallies are much lower than when you are taking a solo hit. And that is because rallies do not include subsidies. So, in most situations, you will not face full debuffs when you are taking a rally. And in which case, then we should be looking at the 30 to 20% scenarios that we have here. And you can see where the cutoff points for these are. Now, with that being said, you can make the argument that since more of your troops are below the cutoff point, we're looking at T11 and below, it is better for us to go with flat refines for our defense. But there's a bit of a snag with this. When you are facing a situation where you are fully debuffed, that's all fine and good. But when you are facing a situation where you are not fully debuffed, like when you are taking a rally, notice here that the percentage refines for your higher troops are still higher than the flat buffs that you will get. Meaning that if you are going to go with flat refines on your defense, essentially your top tier troops will be weaker than they otherwise would be. And that makes sense because if you're going with flat refines all through, yes, it's better for your T11s and below, maybe even your T12s, but your T13s, T14s and above would be weaker if you had the flat buffs than if you had percentage buffs. The other important thing that you need to take into consideration when you're looking at defense is your troop composition. How big are the layers that you have? Meaning that even though the flat buffs are better for your lower tier troops than your higher tier troops, even when you look at the buffs themselves, the base stats, the lower tier troops are weaker than the higher tier troops. The only way for your defense to be more successful when you have flat buffs is when you have the troop count to support those flat buffs, which is why the troop count for the T1 trap is so ridiculously high. All right, 200 million, 300 million troops for T1 calves compared to your other troop count is ridiculously high. And this is why, because the base and the nominal for those troops is so small, so you need to make that up with the numbers. So when you're looking at your layers and you're going with the flat buffs, you need to make sure that you have the troop count in those layers to support making those flat buffs really effective for your defense. And this is a general situation where you're looking at attack. Okay, we have the same thing when we're looking at HP and the same thing when it comes to defense. So this we're looking at calves here is pretty much the same thing for ranged. Okay, if we go through the ranged, we have pretty much the same situation here. And of course, we have the same situation for ground, pretty much some slight differences, but it's pretty much the same thing. So because of these reasons, in my opinion, for defense is not quite as clear-cut as simply saying percentages or flats will be better. And as long as you follow the things that we've talked about, getting the flat refines, making sure that you have the troop count to support, you should see some significant differences when you're defending. Now, with that said, if you are going to go with flat refines, okay, whether for your attacking or whether for your defending, it's not just a simple question of getting any flat refines. Maybe in the case for your T1s, as we see for the T1 ground here, the T1 ground attack, we can see this here. Let's look at the mounted troop. You can see for the mounted troop here, let's look at the HP. Okay, we can see the HP that we have here. For those troops, practically any type of flat refine that is significantly higher than what we have here will be better for those troops. But for you to get the type of results that we are looking at here, the flats that you get need to be above a certain level. And in my opinion, the numbers that we have here, so you can see the flat buff here, this is for mounted attack, this is for mounted HP, and then this is for mounted defense. These values are the values that you should use as a guide for what is an acceptable refine for you to get, if you want the kind of results that we are showing in this analysis. And you can see I have them at the top here. So for attack, that's the flat value. For HP, that's the flat value. For defense, that's the flat value. If you guys would like to take a closer look at this spreadsheet, or you would like to have it as a reference for the kind of flat values that you should be going for, let me know in the comments. And if we have enough people that are interested in it, I'll make it available for everyone. And as you can see, I have also set it up so that if the percentage buff that you're looking at, if you want to change it, it automatically changes all the buffs in the analysis. So if you're interested in the spreadsheet, drop a comment down and let me know. Now, the other important thing that this analysis shows us quite clearly is how important debuffs are in the game. As you can see here, debuffs are a real game changer. They are very important when you are looking at either attacking or defending. And in the case of defense, if you really want to build a good defense, it's not just about flats and T1s. Because with the kind of buffs that we're seeing now, that's only going to take you so far. Debuffs are very important. You probably already know that if you want to increase your debuffs in the game, you have to do it with your sub-generals, and you need Achaemenid gear on them. But if you're looking to increase your debuffs even further than that, then check out this video that we have here, which shows the kind of increase in debuffs that you can expect to get when you upgrade your gear to Parthian gear. That will be very important for trying to boost your defensive capabilities. So be sure to check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you very much. Aka signing out.